Let's go ahead and look at a comprehensive view of how to use Medius.Re, particularly for potatoes. And we're going to use Potatoes USA as our client for demonstration. So there's lots of things that you can do with Medius. The first thing that we're going to look at is we want to find data related to a specific variety. So I'm going to go ahead and search for a variety here in the search bar on the dashboard. So we'll go ahead and type in Lamoka, and it's going to give you a result at the top of varieties that match Lamoka, and if there's any varieties that Lamoka happens to be a parent in, those will be listed below. But I'll go ahead and select Lamoka here. So now you'll see here in our overview, we have the variety name, if it was known by other names, which is quite common in potatoes as well as other commodities, where a variety might be known by something originally, and then when it gets released, it gets a new name. In Medius, you can look up varieties by either name. So by the name that it's known by now or previous name, it'll give you product, so it's a potato. The partner is who developed it, so this was developed by Cornell University in New York, and then any pedigree information, so you have your female and your male parent. Trial groups is going to show you these are the trial groups that Lamoka has been trialed in, and you can see the different years here. Trial blocks, these are locations usually, but these are the different locations that Lamoka has been trialed in. If there's any notes associated with it or any links, you're going to find those here. The second tab is our AI summary analysis, and this takes a look at client-specific data to come up with a general summary related to varietal performance based on the data that has been collected. This is in the early stages at the moment, and you do have the ability to provide feedback, so you can submit feedback, thumb up or thumb down, if you found this to be accurate and helpful. The pedigree tab, this is going to show you your pedigree map, so a tree of pedigrees. So you see Lamoka was NY 115 and the 120, and then you can see how that progressed down. If you wanted to look at data specific to any one of these varieties in the pedigree tree, just click on the node itself and you'll see it switched to Pike. And so we can see an overview here now of Pike. If I click again on Lamoka, it will take me back to Lamoka. So we're looking at Lamoka again. The next tab over here is attributes. So if there's been any attributes assigned to this variety, you will see those here. These can be really helpful for defining disease ratings, as is exampled here, or other relevant information to the variety itself that may or may not be necessarily available in trial data. The next tab is trials. This is going to show us again these trial groups here at the top, and then all of the the client here at the top, and then the different trial groups that are available where there's been data for this particular variety. So I can go ahead and click here on snack, for example, and I'm going to see it's broken down into these two different regions, fresh and storage. These are things that can be defined on trial or on client creation, but that's how Potatoes USA has broken them down, because for potatoes, you have different performance characteristics, whether you're looking for a potato to be used in a fresh location, meaning fried or processed right out of the field, versus a storage location, a potato that needs to be stored for a longer period of time. And so you can scroll down and see the different values here. If you want to dive into the average of one of these values, just go ahead and click on that, and it will show you the breakdown of that information for you here, trial by trial. And then you can see in some of these data fields where it's relevant, there'll be a percentage shown next to the absolute value. And so this percentage here is a total percentage of the trial mean. So how has this variety performed compared to the other varieties within all of the trials that it's been a part of? So that can be helpful for understanding. So you can see all of that information is available here. Media, if there are any images or documents or videos that are associated with the variety, you can find those here. So again, we were looking at snack data. So I can click on snack and it's going to go fetch all those images for me. And if I want to look at an image more closely, just go ahead and click on it and it will pull up a full resolution version of that image. Images can be really helpful to understanding a variety's performance, and that's why we make them available. And if there's any documents, you can see those documents here as well. And then go ahead and click on that and it'll pull up that document that would have your LaMocha in it. So those are some high-level things you can do with looking at variety analysis overall. There's always the option here, this copy link icon, that if I were to click on that, it will automatically copy this link to my clipboard, as well as give me this QR code if you're interested in this QR code for sharing data on things like field days and other beneficial ways. If you had a PowerPoint and you wanted people to be able to quickly scan that and pull up data, you can share that QR code or the URL, and that'll take a user directly to this particular modal for them. If you're on the Trials tab here, you will get a couple additional options up here. You have Export Data. If you click on Export Data, this will dump all of the data for LaMocha into an Excel file for you, so you have everything available to you. And then the other one is Export as an Image. Basically, it will take a screenshot of all of this data. If you need to use that in a report or a presentation, you have that ability to do that. No matter which tab you are on here, you will have this Start a Variety Comparison. This will take you to the Compare module and add LaMocha as your first variety for comparison. Then you'll be able to add other varieties to that. We'll go ahead and look at Compare a little bit later. So let's move on to some other options that we have that we can find here. So I'm going to come over here to the sidebar. We have our featured trial groups. So you have snack and chip trials, and I'm going to expand that out and click on trials. So this is a way that I can look at individual or multiple trials at a time. And so I've just gone ahead and selected these trials. These happen to be 2 fresh trials. And you'll see that it has listed out the data here for me. And up at the top, you get little indications as to what a unit might be or a label. So if you do work in an environment where there is the need for switching between imperial and metric, up here in your trial settings, you do have the ability to change your unit type. And so as you can see, we've got all of our data here for field, and then I can go ahead and click on process, and then now I can see all of the process data available to me as well. One of the handy things here is when you have something like a tuber shape where it should be a value of 1 to 5, where each one of those values corresponds to something, you have the ability to view the standard. So that would be the verbiage that represents the number. So that can be really helpful to understanding your variety data. So let's look at a couple other things that you can do here with trials that we see in these trials in particular. If you wanted to share just a single trial with somebody, you can go ahead and click on this copy link, and that will generate this URL for you as well as a QR code. So you can send that to somebody and it'll pull up that trial data. You also have this weather data option. So if I click on weather data, that's going to pull up weather data from the original planting date to the harvest date automatically. So you can see we got planting here, we got harvest date. And then depending on the trial and the weather station that it is connected to, you'll have different levels of data available to you. So I could go ahead and say, let's look at the average temperature. Let's look at precipitation down here on our bars. And then you have the ability, if you want, to look at what is a multi-year average of that y-axis left, so that average temperature. And so you can kind of see how the current year overlays with the historical values, which gives you some indication as to what maybe happened in this current trial year. The summary data will give you your aggregates over all of those. And if there are any trial events, those will show up here. Potatoes USA doesn't use that, but trial events can be defined as anything, whether it's an application of a pesticide, herbicide, insecticide, whether it's an irrigation schedule, whether you want to log, something like a vine kill event that happened. You have the ability to add those, and those will show up here. Your weather data, that's going to show you all of your weather data listed out for you here, including growing degree days, which are auto-calculated based on a defined threshold. In this particular case, it happens to be 40 degrees for Potatoes USA by default. Looking at something like California, it's probably closer to 50. So you could make that change and then see that updated here automatically. And now you have your new values for 50 degrees growing degree days instead of 40. Go ahead and reset that back to 40. And we'll go ahead and close this. The other option you'll see down here is we have some documents that are associated with this trial. So if I click on that link, it'll pull up the documents that have been uploaded or tied to that particular trial. That can be helpful in sharing additional information that goes beyond just the trial data that's available. And then if you see this little images/media icon here, if there are any images associated with this trial, you can find those as well. So you can see the thumbnail previews over here and be able to pull up those images. Let's go ahead and look at some of our options here related to the different settings. So some of these will be on by default for you, but you can mix and match. So standards, that's what we talked about before here with tuber shape. If I were to turn that off, you'll notice now tuber shape is just listed as the actual number, but with it turned on, it shows the representation of the value that is related to that number. You can do things like pin your trial information. So if I turn that off, now all of this trial information at the front is no longer pinned. I can turn that back on, and now it will pin that for me here in the front so that when I scroll, that information is locked there in place. Hiding empty columns, that's when you have basically saying, hey, if there's no data for a particular column, there's no need to show it. So that kind of helps clean things up. So as I turn that off, you'll see there's some days from planting to vine kill that weren't loaded, or a vine kill date that wasn't loaded here, right? Those are those empty columns. So I can go ahead and turn those off. If you had replicated data, you could average those replicates. You would just turn those on. If you have check values defined, so you've got these two here defined as checks, you could toggle that on, and it will append that. If it's not up here, it will append that automatically. Oops, sorry, this one, check. You'll see right here, you've got those check values added in. We talked about before, you could change imperial to metric. So if you were working in a company that is global and you need the ability to toggle back and forth, you have the ability to represent those values as necessary. So you can see metric ton per hectare is the metric equivalent to hundredweight per acre here in imperial. So a couple other things while you're in here is you can download this trial data as a CSV or an Excel document. You can generate reports. So if you have reports that are defined for you, those could be things like PDFs that need to be generated, or an custom Excel report that needs to be generated. You would find those options here under Generate Report. So let's go ahead and close those trial settings there. And now I'm going to go to the next piece under Snack, and that is Analytics. So when I come to Analytics, if you've been here before, you're going to see whatever you were working on before already show up. But your first time visiting, it's going to be blank. So we need to do a couple things. Let's set the trial year that we want. So 2024 is the year that we're going to set. How do we want to group our data? Do we want to group it by data fields, by the trials themselves, by trial blocks, or these trial block categories? And how do I want to key my data? So let's leave these at the default for now. We're going to go ahead and select some data fields so we can get started. So let's select our specific gravity. Let's grab yield total and yield number 1. And let's also see if there's any hollow heart data in there. And then process data is important to us. Let's look at our defect percentages. So one of the things you'll notice with these defect percentages is there's a -1. This -1 is telling you that this data field can be inverted, meaning that a lower value is actually better than a higher value. So let's go ahead and rebuild our analytics with what we've selected. And you'll see here at the top, they're now grouped by their specific data field. In our table, we've got all of our varieties listed here, and then across the headers of our table, grouped by our trial block categories, so fresh and storage, we have all of our trial blocks or our locations. And as you scroll over, you'll see then you've got current year's average. So this would be across all the fresh, all the storage, and everything, plus a multi-year average. So it'll default to 3 years for a multi-year average. And then you have Y and L values. The Y will tell you the number of years represented in that value, and the L is going to tell you the number of locations. So it's helpful to know, okay, how much data was actually used to generate this average? Is this something that performed well in a single year, or am I seeing some good performance over time? So I can go ahead and I could sort by this total, and you will see here that we've got a single year one and a multi-year value here sitting at the top for specific gravity. So we got pretty good gravity overall for these 2 varieties, something that you would actually expect coming out of a New York variety. They always have good gravities for the most part. And so we're looking at here now green at the top and red at the bottom. So what do these mean? Green is what we usually refer to as best, and red is worst. And the reason we use best and worst is because best is not always the maximum value and worst is not always the minimum value. So in particular with specific gravity, you're looking as a potato processor to increase your potential output by reducing your input, and you're going to gain more efficiencies with an increase in solids or specific gravity. And so that's why you are looking for solids that are going to be a little higher. Understanding, of course, that there is a threshold that when you get above a certain level of solids, that you're going to see some issues related to bruising. So let's look at internal defects here, for example, and you can see not all the sites have filled this in, but you'll get a flip here of the colors. So the green is still best and red is still worst. But what you're seeing here now is the lowest value is the green is the best and the red is the worst. And you'll see the same for external and total. But then when we go to yield, we're back again to the highest value is in green. And so what do the blue and the yellows mean? Well, the blue is giving you an indication of this is performing above the mean, and the yellow is giving you an indication of performing below the mean. So all of these are then used to calculate the shading through a thing called z-scores, which is z-score is the number of standard deviations off the mean. If you want to look into what those z-scores are, you can toggle them on here under your analytics settings, and you can see that this particular value is 2.45 standard deviations above the mean, whereas this one is just barely above the mean, and these are now all below because they're negative. And so all of those z-scores values are used then to give me this total score average here in the final tab. And so what the total score average does is it takes your specific gravity, all of your defect percentages, and your yield numbers and your hollow heart, and it says, okay, I'm looking at now all of these relative performance based on standard deviation, combine that into a single score so that I can see a varietal performance across all of these different metrics that I've selected. And you can now see that we have a ranking based on that performance, and you can see how well something performed over something else. So that can be really handy here. And you have some flexibility in here to be able to mix and match. So for example, if you're a grower and you come in and you want to increase the yield, you can come here to toggle weights, and we will go ahead and turn those on. And I can increase my total yield by, let's take it up to 2, right? That's going to give it a weighted factor of 2. So essentially, weight yield total, multiply it by 2 when factoring in your scores. And if you're a processor, yeah, yield's important, but you also care about specific gravity. So let's say we take specific gravity up as well. Now let's go ahead and look at our total score averages, and you can see that our numbers here have adjusted because we've given more weight to a particular parameter than the other parameters. So you have flexibility in being able to specify how much you want weighted. If, for example, you wanted, I don't know why you would, but we'll do this silly example. If you wanted to invert specific gravity, saying that a lower value is better, you can just click on that plus and make it a minus, and you'll see it goes to -1 here, and that will invert everything. We can take it back to the positive to the plus. So let's go ahead and now maybe look at our data a little differently. One of my favorite ways to look at analytics data is by trial block. So this would be by location, because every location is going to have a little bit different performance because there's environmental factors that come to play, such as soil, such as climate, growing degree days, etc. Let's go ahead and reset here our weights so that we're back to all 1. Okay, so now we have all of our trial locations here in our tabs across the top, and then we have those different data fields that we've selected here as our columns. So you see the single year here, and then you also see the multi-year. And instead of having our score averages as a final tab like we did before, it's now right here in that specific location. So I could sort by that and see varietal performance across all the data fields that I've selected for this one location, in this particular case, California. But you also have, you can go to the total piece here at the end, and this would include all of your locations to be able to see the specific data fields in the columns and then see multi-year performance. So you've got a lot of flexibility in how you can look at this information. Things like keying the data this is what defines this column here. And so you could, if you had replicated data, you could split it out by selecting varieties and replicate. And so you'd see the variety and the replicate information. Or if you wanted to look at it by their identifier numbers, whether it was a control or not a control, you have that flexibility to define that. Similar to all of the other features, you always have the ability to copy a link and share this data with anybody who would have had access to it anyways. So if you click on copy link, it's going to generate a unique URL here for you, and that URL, when shared with somebody, would bring them right exactly to this page. You have the ability to export this as an image. That way, if you wanted to include it in a presentation, you have the flexibility to do so. And then you have a whole bunch of settings here in analytics. We looked at the z-scores before. Showing the range will show you the min and the max for every value. Showing the count, that's the y's and the l's there. Pinning the keys is so that when you scroll left and right, those keys stay in place. You can change the number of years that you want to be able to show. Typically 3 years is the default. That seems to be pretty viable across all commodities. And then you can kind of split things out. So if I say show all years and rebuild that, instead of just showing 2024 through average, you could see 2022, 2023, and 2024. And so you'll notice that in 2024, some new varieties were added here that weren't trialed in 2023. Same with 2022, right? That's why you see here where you've got the Y3, the L3, the Y3 here, right? Those were included in all 3 years. Let's go ahead and turn that off and rebuild those. You can flop your units again here if you need in metric versus imperial. And then there's a few things that can just help you with stylizing the data. So that's a look at the analytics. So where do we go from here, right? We just talked about features that are available in analytics. And you can certainly go to your filters and add some filters to take data out of here. So you could select a specific data field. Say, for example, we wanted to get rid of some outliers here with specific gravity. I could say I only want specific gravity where it's between 1075 and we'll go with 11. And I can say filter, and it's going to cut out all of that extra data that doesn't match those parameters, right? So you've now just limited down your data set. If you only want to look at certain trial blocks, you can kind of take those away here and add them back in as needed, help you being able to narrow down to exactly what you need. So you've narrowed it down to what you need. You've come here to the total. You've sorted by it. Now what do? How do we actually make some actionable changes on this data? And so what we can see here is this one is just 1 year's worth of data. I'm going to let that one go because it's probably, I want to see some more years on it. So let's grab these above average varieties that were in for multiple years. So I've got these 3 varieties here that were for multiple years. So 2 years. I'm going to select them. You can see now we have 3 varieties selected. And then I'm going to go up to compare. And this is going to take us now into the compare module, which will, based on those 3 years that we had selected, automatically add these varieties for me. And you can see 1, 2, 3. Now let's go ahead and add Lamoka in because that's a check variety. So now I've added Lamoka, and you'll see we've got our comparisons happening here. So the data is going to look very similar to what you were looking at when we were in variety summary. That's just one of the varieties. Now we're looking at the same thing across multiple varieties. So you can see here that these varieties were in NCPT, SNAC, NextGen, and then these screening trials. Those are the different trial groups that were included. And you can see all the different trial blocks. Now you'll notice here that we've got just single years worth of data, even though we had seen that these varieties existed for multiple years. Well, the reason being is because we have these filters applied, and the filters turn on correlated data, which says only return where these varieties all existed in the same trials. So because of that, correlated data has just narrowed it down to these 8 varieties records, or these 8 sites that all of these were included together. And so we can scroll down and we can see all of our different values here. Like you could in the variety summary, you can click on a single one of these values and it'll pull up the breakdown of all of those. Or you can click on the data field itself and it will expand that out and it will show you the values for each one of those trials. You can see all the trials here. And then this little value, it's kind of bolded and then faded here at the beginning. This would be the trial average for that particular trial. Okay, so let's say I wanted to see the percentage difference. I would just come up here to compare settings and then say show percentage. And it would turn those percentage values on for me. So I can see trial by trial percentage, or I can see overall percentage performance for any data field that makes sense for, which you can set that up in your settings for the client. So now that I've taken a look at my compare data here, a couple things. If you want to be able to share this with somebody in a way that's helpful, you can do a cell markup. So you can pick any one of these colors. Let's say, for example, we pick the green and we come down here and we want to highlight that this one is a good one, a winner, right? Like we really like that gravity. That looks really nice. But then some of these yields, these are, let's say these are mediocre yields, but these look pretty good, right? You can kind of mark those up, which can be a helpful way to share this with other people. So then if you came up here to copy link and generated this link and then shared this URL with somebody, when they click on that, they would see these markings as well, which can be helpful for them in understanding what you wanted them to see. You can also download this data. This will download it to an Excel file that'll have the comparison data as well as all of the raw data that made up the comparison. Again, you can generate an image if you want to export that image. Some of the other features we have here is you can, again, the hide empty fields, it's on by default. You can turn that off. If you want to see those counts, right? How many years or how many locations are represented in that average, because even though you see up here at the top, there's 8 variety records, maybe not all 8 locations actually collected this particular value. So you could see here with specific gravity, there's only 7 locations that are represented overall by that particular variety. So you can turn those on and off. Again, you can toggle your imperial and metric. Do you want to be able to see some variety media here at the top? And then some other methods for displaying and changing how this is viewed. And so you have some flexibility in your comparison. A feature that, so let's go ahead and look at some other features that are available to you. You have over here on the sidebar your documents. So this will contain all of the documents that have been uploaded. So for example, if I select snack chip, I can go expand this out to 2024, and this will have any of these documents that have been submitted here. And so you have the ability to pull those up. Really handy way of just keeping track of a lot of documents. If you've ever been at any industry meeting or you get an email, right, with a document that's like, hey, here's a whole bunch of tables, much like this one is, and a whole bunch of summaries. And then you lose the email, or your company has a policy where your emails get deleted after a certain period of time, or you just had a printout and it's like, who knows where you put that. This document library is a great way to have a repository of information. So we always encourage our clients to use this as much as possible for those documents that they're generating, to have a historical repository of that information. So that can be really helpful. Then you have the ability to download that document. You can, again, share a link to it if you need to share it with somebody, or actually email it directly from here if you like. So documents, pretty much self-explanatory. So another feature that we can look at here is data center. And this is our method for either A, extracting large amounts of data out in order to use it in another analysis tool, like if you use a SAS or a JMP or an RStudio and you need to dump your data, or you want to do your own graphing. So let's go ahead and go to 2024, and I'm going to select snack chip trials, and it's going to go fetch all of those trials for me. Let's just look at Michigan for the sake of this argument, and then I'm going to go to data fields. So what data fields do I want? Well, let's go ahead and select all of the field ones, and then I'm going to come up here and say, okay, let's reload this data. So you can see not a lot of data here, but the same thing would be true if this was a ton of data. Okay, so now let's go ahead and move towards doing something with this. I'm going to click here on charts, and we're going to build some charts. So let's select a series. It's just a single trial at the time. If we had multiple trials, right, that would be your series. The x-axis, let's go ahead and do variety. And then for values, let's go ahead and just look at our yield total. And so here we have our nice little graph of one single trial showing our yield performance. I could change this to be variety to be our series, right? And you can see now I get multiple different colors. But let's actually make this interesting and useful. One of my favorite ways of looking at graphical data, specifically for potatoes, is actually do a scatter plot. This is going to look a little ugly to start, but it will, after a couple steps, we'll get it clean. All right, so scatter plot. I need to set my series to be the variety, right? So we have all of our varieties here at the top for the series. I need my x-axis. I want that to be specific gravity. Okay, so now what I'm looking at is a gravity by yield total analysis. And so I want to find a variety that has the highest yield and the highest specific gravity. And so as you can see right up here in this corner, we've got AF 6206-5 has high yield and high gravity because it's towards that upper right quadrant. Now this is where you have some good flexibility in being able to understand this better. We're going to go to options, and here in our options, I'm going to say show a target, and we're going to define what that target is. So in the chip industry, when you're working with specific gravity, typically 1085 is that target line. So we can add 1085, you'll see that target line gets added. And then for my yield total, I want to find something that's going to give me, in Michigan, over 550 hundredweight per acre. I'm being a little aggressive here, but it's for the demonstration. And then I'm going to say, go ahead and center those targets. So it kind of redraws your mins and your maxes on your X and your Y axis so that those targets are centered. And now we can see our varietal performances here. So the things that are in this upper right-hand quadrant, those are going to be the varieties that are giving me the maximum gravity and the maximum yield. So as a processor, you'd be happy. As a grower, you'd be happy if you're just looking at yield total and specific gravity. Obviously, you're not looking at factors like defect percentages and other things. So we can go ahead and turn on some of these labels so that we can see what some of these are. And we can do some shifting here so we can kind of offset some of these labels to try to fit them in. So you can see these varieties here in this top quadrant are the ones that we want. So at this point I could say save that chart as a PNG, and it will save that for me. And now I can use that wherever I need to use this particular chart. So a handy way of being able to analyze visually some of that data. So the different chart types you've got, right? Bar, line, a radar graph, a donut graph, scatter, a box plot. You've got a horizontal bar and then a horizontal box plot as well. So there's flexibility there in being able to visualize your data in Data Center. If there are any images that are associated with the data that you selected, just hit the images button here and it'll pull up all those images for you. So these would be images that are associated with that data. And if you wanted to download all of these images, you've got that option here. It'll zip them up for you and download them nice and tidy. And so that's a kind of a handy look at Data Center. You've got an ability in here to change your percentage formats, right? If you want those to be decimal represented or whole number represented, do you want to average your replicates? If you're dumping this as a CSV, what do you want in your headers to be? Do you want to include labels? Do you just want to show the title? Do you want the data field name? And then for that export to things like a jump or a SAS, when you have empty values, do you want it to be a no fill or do you want it to be that NA so that those additional statistical tools can interpret your data for you? So that is an overview, a more comprehensive overview of the different features that you can find within Medius.Re to help you in analyzing your trial data, in particular, as we were looking at here, your potato data related to how Potatoes USA is using it.